They handed her a mop, not the lab coat she'd earned. Inside NASA's control room, she scrubbed floors while staring at equations she understood better than the men in suits. When a billion-dollar launch spiraled toward disaster, she saw the mistake no one else could. But the moment she tried to speak, security was called. What happened next would expose the ugliest truth NASA tried to bury. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The morning sunlight spilled across the wide glass windows of the NASA facility, painting the tiled floors with a golden sheen. For Alicia Turner, the moment felt like a dream materializing into flesh and stone. Every brick of this place held weight. Decades of history, innovation, failures, triumphs. She could almost hear echoes of rocket launches in her head, the countdowns, the cheers, the silence when humanity reached higher than ever before. Her palms were damp as she clutched the strap of her worn leather bag, the only thing she had carried from her college days before everything unraveled. Inside that bag rested notebooks thick with calculations, equations scribbled in the margins of old essays, and half-finished sketches of spacecraft she had designed in stolen moments. Today, she thought, would be the day those ideas might finally find a home. She followed the stream of employees moving briskly through the entrance. Men in neatly pressed white shirts, women in navy skirts, all with badges swinging at their hips. Alicia kept her head high, refusing to shrink though her badge didn't match theirs. It bore her name, Turner, Alicia J, printed neatly in black font. Underneath, her title. She hadn't yet dared to look at it, too nervous to ruin the possibility of joy. When she finally lifted the badge into the light, her breath caught. Custodial staff. Her smile faltered. She read it again, as if the letters might rearrange into something else. Research assistant, intern, anything closer to the dream. But the words stayed there, cold, fine. A voice broke through her daze. You must be Turner. A man in his 50s stood near the reception desk, his tie slightly loose, a clipboard in his hand. His tone carried no warmth. He looked at her the way people looked at something they didn't order but had to accept. Yes, sir. Alicia Turner, she answered, her voice steady though a storm brewed beneath her ribs. He nodded once, curt. Follow me. They moved through the wide hallways, where framed photos of astronauts and rocket launches lined the walls like sacred relics. Alicia's eyes lingered on them. Buzz Aldrin, Katherine Johnson, Apollo Crews. She felt like she was walking into a cathedral built for minds like hers. The man's shoes clicked against the floor, breaking her reverie. Finally, they stopped at a supply closet. The man opened the door, revealing shelves of cleaning supplies, buckets, sprays, rolls of paper towels. Hanging neatly from hooks were freshly pressed uniforms. He pulled one out, blue with a white patch stitched on the chest. This is yours. He thrust it toward her. You'll find your mop in the corner. Bathrooms get checked every 2 hours. Break room trash by 5. Keep out of restricted areas. Her throat went dry. She forced herself to ask, Excuse me, I think there might be some mistake. I applied for... He cut her off with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. There's no mistake. We don't have lab coats for everyone. His pause lingered like a blade. But you should be grateful. Plenty of folks would kill just to step inside these walls. Alicia froze, her fingers tightening around the fabric in her hands. The uniform weighed heavier than it should, as if stitched with humiliation. Yes, sir, she whispered. The man scribbled something on his clipboard, already turning away. Good. Don't let me hear complaints. You'll last longer here if you just keep quiet and do your job. When he disappeared down the hallway, Alicia stood alone, the uniform dangling from her hand. She pressed it against her chest, steadying herself. Her dream of entering NASA hadn't been about prestige or money. It had been about contribution, about proving that someone like her could help carry humanity into the stars. But now she was being asked to clean floors, not touch equations. Her chest burned, shame and rage mixing in equal measure. But beneath it all, one stubborn thought pushed forward. At least she was inside. Inside these walls, she could watch, she could learn, she could wait. By noon, Alicia was already moving through the corridors with her cart, a mop in one hand, her badge swinging like a cruel reminder of her place. She had trained herself to look downward, to avoid the sharp glances that cut through her skin like blades. Still, whispers followed her. Who hired her? One woman murmured. Didn't know they were lowering standards. Another voice floated. Each comment dug deep, but she swallowed the bitterness, letting it settle like stones in her stomach. In the main engineering wing, the air vibrated with urgency. Engineers clustered around a long chalkboard, filled with sprawling equations, symbols stacked like a foreign language. But one Alicia knew fluently. She slowed her pace, her mop gliding silently as she edged closer. Trajectory won't hold at that speed, one man muttered, tapping his chalk against the board. Another replied, if we reduce the angle by 2 degrees, we lose stability. No, that throws the payload off balance. We'll risk complete mission failure. Their voices grew louder, frustration sharp in the air. Alicia's eyes scanned the equations. Numbers and angles danced in her head, rearranging, aligning. It wasn't instinct. It was years of self-study, years of staying up with textbooks when the world told her she couldn't. She saw the flaw immediately, a missing variable, a correction so clear it almost made her laugh. Her fingers twitched against the mop handle. She wanted to step forward, to take the chalk, to show them the adjustment that would save their calculations. But her badge, that word custodial, burned against her chest. She pressed her lips together, whispering silently to herself, not yet. The board filled with more frantic scribbles. One engineer slammed the eraser against the surface, smudging lines in irritation. This doesn't make sense. We've gone in circles for 3 days. Alicia dipped her mop into the bucket, her hands trembling. She forced herself to keep moving, dragging the mop across the floor. Each stroke echoed like a drumbeat against her pride. Yet her eyes never left the chalkboard. For the first time since she stepped into NASA, she realized something undeniable. They were lost, and she had the answer. Her heart pounded, adrenaline and fear colliding in her chest. She glanced around, making sure no one noticed the intensity of her stare. Then, slowly, carefully, she leaned on the mop and whispered, as though confessing to the walls, I can fix that. And just as the words left her lips, one of the engineers turned, his eyes narrowing, as if he had heard something. Alicia froze, caught between invisibility and exposure, as the room erupted in another heated argument, over a problem she already knew how to solve. The image of the chalkboard, and its furious scribbles followed Alicia long after her shift ended. That night, as she sat on the edge of her narrow bed in her small apartment, the glow of a desk lamp lit the open pages of her notebook. Equations stretched across them like constellations on a private sky. Her hand hovered over the paper, but instead of writing, her mind drifted backward, back to the place where her love for the stars had first taken root. Atlanta summers had been brutal, but Alicia remembered them with a strange fondness. As a little girl, she would lie flat on the roof of her grandmother's house, the tar shingles still warm under her back, and stare into the endless black above. While other kids chased fireflies, Alicia traced the faint outlines of Orion and Cassiopeia with her finger, whispering their names like prayers. She saw possibility up there, a world not limited by race or class, a canvas that belonged to everyone. Her fascination didn't stop at stargazing. By age 10, she was scavenging old wires and scrap metal from her uncle's garage, building makeshift rockets powered by baking soda and vinegar. Neighbors gathered sometimes just to watch that Turner girl launch soda bottles into the sky. They clapped, impressed, though Alicia noticed the hesitation in their voices when they told her parents, she's real smart, smarter than most boys. But you know, opportunities are limited. That phrase became a shadow, following her through the years. At school, her notebooks filled faster than her teachers could keep up. In math class, she corrected her teacher once, gently, when an equation on the board missed a variable. The classroom went silent. Her teacher gave a stiff smile, patted her shoulder, and later told her parents in a hushed voice, she's remarkable, but she should be careful not to outshine too much. It doesn't go over well for girls like her. At first, Alicia didn't understand, but as she grew, the meaning sharpened. Teachers who praised her in private fell silent when awards were handed out in assemblies. Science fair ribbons went to others, even when her projects outstripped them in complexity. When her model rockets soared higher than the judges expected, the comment wasn't about her ingenuity. It was, did someone help you with this? Her mother, Lorraine Turner, saw the frustration building in her daughter's eyes. One night, she sat Alicia down at the kitchen table, the smell of collard greens filling the small house. Baby, don't you let them dim your shine. You got something special. God don't hand out gifts like yours to everyone. Alicia nodded, but the sting of invisibility lingered. Still, she pushed forward. She devoured textbooks, checked out library books beyond her grade level, and spent hours scribbling formulas across scrap paper. Her father, Marcus, a mechanic with grease permanently etched into his hands, built her a small workbench in the garage. "If the world won't give you a lab, we'll make our own," he said. By the time she was in high school, Alicia had already drafted her own version of orbital calculations, scrawled across poster boards taped to her bedroom walls. Teachers whispered that she might be a once-in-a-generation mind. Counselors told her she should apply to the top universities, and she did. When the acceptance letter from MIT arrived, Alicia cried so hard her mother held her for nearly an hour. It wasn't just the achievement, it was the validation, the proof that brilliance could break barriers. The letter came with a scholarship offer, a full ride that promised her family wouldn't have to carry the impossible weight of tuition. Neighbors came by with congratulations. Some called her the pride of the block. But even then, there were voices undercutting the celebration. "She's lucky," someone muttered. "Affirmative action, maybe. Doesn't mean she belongs there." Alicia tried to let the noise wash off her. She kept her eyes fixed on the stars. The summer before she was set to leave for MIT, she received another letter. This one, thinner, colder. It explained that due to funding real allocations and program adjustments, her scholarship was being rescinded. The university apologized for the inconvenience. They encouraged her to reapply for financial aid, though they knew, as she knew, her family couldn't possibly cover the cost. Alicia read the letter aloud in the kitchen. Her father slammed his fist on the table so hard the salt shaker toppled. "They can't do this. They can't take it back." Her mother's eyes brimmed with tears. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice breaking. But Alicia just stood there, the letter trembling in her hand. It felt like the universe itself had reached down and snuffed out her flame. She called the admissions office the next day, her voice steady though her chest felt hollow. "There must be some mistake," she said. But the woman on the other end was clinical, rehearsed. "Unfortunately, Miss Turner, there are limited resources. Competition is high. Perhaps you might consider a community college." The word echoed in her ear like an insult. Limited resources. That phrase again. Always limited. Always lacking. Always for people like her. The weeks that followed blurred together. Alicia watched her dream shatter piece by piece. While classmates packed for Harvard, Yale, MIT, she packed nothing. Instead, she searched for work, desperate to find a foothold in a world that seemed determined to keep her at the margins. She refused to give up entirely. If she couldn't go to MIT, she would find another way into the world of science. She scoured job listings until she saw it: NASA hiring custodial staff. Most would have dismissed it as beneath them. But Alicia saw something else. A doorway, however small, into the very heart of where she longed to be. She told her parents. Her father frowned. "A janitor? Baby, you're worth more than that." Her mother, though, touched her shoulder gently. "Sometimes you get in however you can. Once you're in, you find your way up." Alicia nodded. She promised herself it would only be temporary. Just a foot in the door, a mop in her hand today, maybe equations tomorrow. When the acceptance letter arrived for the custodial position, it didn't carry the glory of MIT's embossed seal, but Alicia held it like it was still a lifeline. It meant she would walk into NASA, even if not as a scientist yet. She told herself it would be enough. But deep down, in the quiet of her own heart, she knew it was not enough, not even close. And as she stepped through NASA's doors on her first day, wearing the uniform pressed into her hands, she had no idea she was about to confront a problem that would test not just her knowledge, but her very place in a world that refused to see her brilliance. The day after Alicia's first shift, the building's rhythms began to map themselves onto her. The click of dress shoes, the low roar of printers, the metal sigh of elevator doors. Each sound told time in a place where the clock belonged to people with badges that opened everything. Her badge opened closets. She learned the hallways by scent. Sharp coffee and mission planning, solvent and hot plastic and materials, cold filtered air and the faint chalk dust tang in flight dynamics. The floors gleamed so bright they mirrored the ceiling lights, and Alicia sometimes caught her reflection in them, a ghost trailing a mop past glass walls that guarded equations like expensive art. She didn't linger. You couldn't linger. Harold Creighton, the facilities coordinator with a voice smoothed by routine, made sure of that. "Keep the hallways clear," he said without looking up from his clipboard. "Scientists don't like obstacles," he said. "Obstacles, the way you'd say leak or infestation. "Yes, Mr. Creighton," she answered, rolling her cart forward. Every time she spoke his name, it tasted like chalk. Inside the control wing, engineers stood shoulder to shoulder, facing a board that stretched the length of the room. White symbols crawled across it in shifting layers, the residue of arguments that never stopped. Alicia tracked the shapes while she dusted the baseboards. She heard a voice, tight, nasal, belonging to a man with a maple leaf pin on his lanyard. "You're losing delta V on the second burn, Bryce. Look at the mass fraction. It's not clearing the margin." Another voice, lower, defensive. "I accounted for boil off, Chelsea. The margin's fine." "It's not fine," said a third, tired but certain. "We're carrying a cross-range drift we can't afford." Alicia's hands moved automatically. Wipe, rinse, ring. Her attention locked to the chalk. There was a missing term. She could feel it before she could name it, like standing under a sky and knowing rain was coming. She had read about it on nights when the apartment walls felt thinner than paper. The Earth's bulge tugging on a path until it warped. The J2 perturbation that stole perfection atom by atom. She saw where it should sit in the equation, and did. Her fingers curled around the mop handle, until the wood pressed crescents into her palm. "Let's park it and reconvene," said the tired voice. Dr. Everett Lang, his nameplate read. Gray at the temples. Posture carved by too many nights stooped over simulations. He was the only one who, when Alicia moved past, shifted his stance so she had room. Not a smile, just room. It felt like a gift. When the room emptied, Alicia drifted toward the board, as if pulled by gravity. She kept a rag in her hand, in case someone snapped at her. Up close, the smudges glowed like bruises. She could see the route they'd tried. Insertion burn. Plane adjustment. Rendezvous window. She could see where the numbers fought each other. She could see how to make them stop. She didn't reach for the chalk. Instead, she reached for memory. Her mind wrote the correction, or her hand dared not. At the cart, she flipped her notebook open behind a roll of paper towels and copied the skeleton of the board, each line fast and precise. It was muscle memory now. Grasp, glance, write, hide. Harold would have a stroke if he caught her scribbling. She'd learned that the first day when he found calculus in her margins and said, "We don't pay you for pretend." In the break room later, Alicia microwaved soup and sat at a far table under a corkboard peppered with flyers. STEM camp for kids, a wellness seminar, a barbecue RSVP, with a handwritten note. Bring your own dignity. She didn't know if it was a joke or a warning. Two admin assistants walked in, balancing paper plates. One nodded toward Alicia's cart, parked by the door. "She's new." Said the other. "Creighton says she's bright. But, you know." A shrug. A sliding of eyes down and up. "He's got her in the right place." Alicia stared into her soup. She told herself to take the heat of it as proof of being alive. At 3:17, a junior engineer in a cardigan asked if she could come back later to vacuum. "We've got a lot going on," he said, and it was the politest shooing she'd had in days. She nodded, wheeled away, and took the long route. The long route past a small office, with a narrow window and a paper nameplate that read, "Dr. Maya Farrell, Guidance and Control." Her door was open. Inside, a desk lamp threw a circle of light onto stacks of printouts, and on top of one stack rested a small bronze statue of a woman holding a globe. Alicia paused, barely. The statue's plaque read, "We all belong to the sky." She wanted to carry that sentence out with her like a warm stone in a pocket. By evening, the building thinned. A night shift hush replaced the daytime urgency. The janitorial crew swapped quick greetings in the hallway. Gabe from floors, Shamis from restrooms, someone new whose name, Alicia, didn't catch. She learned the quiet truths of the place from them. Which doors stuck, which managers barked, which labs left thumbprints of arrogance on every surface. She also learned this: nobody ever admitted how much they noticed. Shamis leaned against her cart and whispered, "You keep your head down, you'll be fine." Then softer, "You keep your head up, you might do something better than fine. Just watch your back while you do it." "Noted," Alicia murmured, and meant it. In flight dynamics, alone now, the chalkboard loomed unguarded. An eraser lay on the sill like a spent weapon. Alicia wheeled her cart into the room and set her rag on the nearest workstation. The silence invited the sound of her own breath. She studied the board again, slower. When she answered a problem in her head, it came with a feeling she craved, like stepping into a room where someone had been singing and catching the last hum in the air. She wasn't trying to be a savior. She simply wanted the world to know what her mind could do. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How's your day, baby?"
"Good," she typed, then deleted it. "Hard. But I'm in the right place."
3 dots. A pause. "You always have been." Alicia smiled at the screen and tucked it away. Then she emptied a trash bin. A crumpled ball of paper fell to the floor and rolled under the desk. She reached down and pulled it out, then paused. The paper felt heavy with ink and decisions. She flattened it against the desk. It was an internal memo. She recognized the header: NASA Pathways Rotation Program Recommendations. The second page had a bulleted list, each line a name followed by a status. Her eyes snagged on the third line and locked there. Turner, Alicia J. Recommend for interview. Next to it, a thick black stroke. Rescinded. Her pulse hiccuped. She scanned the margins. Someone had handwritten a note in the tidy looping script of someone used to being obeyed. Optics. Reassigned to custodial. Until further review. GP. Her mind flipped through lanyards, door plates, signatures. Graham Pike, HR lead with the maple leaf pin. No, that belonged to the engineer. She'd misremembered. GP could be Gerald Park from personnel. Or Gary Pritchard, deputy ops. Whoever it was had transformed an interview into a mop with a pen. The paper smelled faintly of coffee and cologne, and the morality of a closed door. Alicia's throat tightened. For a dizzy second she saw 2 versions of herself diverging, one in a lab with her name on a project slate, one hunched over a bucket. She wasn't a random hire. She had been on a list. She had been seen, and then she had been moved. She folded the memo and slid it into her notebook, hands steady even as her insides shook. The twist of it being both wanted and erased lit something under her sternum that felt like a fuse. "Working late?" The voice startled her. Dr. Lang stood in the doorway with a paper cup and dark crescents under his eyes. He didn't look at her cart. He looked past her toward the board, like a man returning to a battlefield he couldn't leave alone. "Just finishing," she said. He nodded, took a drink, and walked to the chalkboard. "We're chasing the same ghost we've been chasing for a week," he said, more to himself than to her. "Or maybe we're the ghost." Alicia kept her gaze on the rag in her hand. "Ghosts don't leave footprints," she said before she could stop herself. Dr. Lang glanced at her, the side of his mouth tilting. "No. But they leave drafts." He tapped a section of the board. "This draft keeps moving the candle." He lingered, then set his cup down and rubbed his face. "Good night." "Good night, sir." After he left, her breath slowly evened out. The room felt charged now, not with permission exactly, but with the truth of her discovery folded like a secret under her hand. She could do something with this. She could write the correction anonymously. She could slide it under a door. She could become a rumor that saved millions of dollars and a mission. A printer hummed down the hall. A door latched. The building settled deeper into itself. Alicia moved along the corners, emptying bins, wiping surfaces. At Dr. Maya Farrell's office, the door was ajar. A pool of lamplight revealed a desk, covered in neat rows, a compass, a stack of journals, a small metal ring of keys. Alicia hesitated, then stepped back, unwilling to be seen where she had no permission to be. People like her were always accused first and forgiven last. Back in Flight Dynamics, the chalkboard waited. She stood facing it, a quiet ache unfolding under her ribs. She didn't hate the people whose voices filled the room by day. Not exactly. She hated the structure that bent them away from seeing her. The mop's rubber handle squeaked when she leaned it against the table. She wiped the sill with slow, careful strokes, clearing powdery residue into her palm. It made a small white cloud when she blew it away. That, she thought, is how erasure works. It looks like cleaning. Harold's voice drifted through the doorway. "You still in here, Turner?"
"Yes, sir," she called back, throat dry.
"Wrap it, and don't touch the board. Cruz wrecked a half-day's work once. Don't need that drama." She felt heat crawl up her neck. Understood. His footsteps faded. Silence returned, thick and expectant. Alicia pressed her knuckles to the edge of the board, leaving no mark. She opened her notebook and, under the folded memo, scribbled the correction line for line. She didn't need to look up. The board was already printed on the back of her eyes. The adjustment wasn't flashy. It never is. It was a small acknowledgement that the world is lumpy where you want it smooth. and that humility in math saves rockets just as surely as brilliance does. Her phone buzzed again, this time a number she didn't recognize. A voicemail arrived without a ring. She put the phone to her ear and heard a woman's voice she couldn't place. "Miss Turner, this is a courtesy call. You were not meant to see certain paperwork. Please dispose of it. Any further retention of internal documents is a violation of policy." Alicia froze, the memo burning in her notebook like a coal. She looked toward the doorway, where fluorescent light colored the floor in a long wedge. She felt watched, but no one stood there. The message ended with no callback number, no name, just a disconnect tone that rang too long. She swallowed and hit delete. Her thumb hovered, then moved to airplane mode. She set the phone face down and breathed. "You are not a ghost," she whispered. She set the eraser down carefully. Chalk dust climbed into the air and settled like snowfall. In the quiet, she heard the smallest sound, a piece of chalk rolling in its groove, until it bumped a knot in the wood and stopped. She shouldered her bag, took the mop, and moved to the door. Then she stopped dead. Across the top of the board, in fresh red grease pencil, a new header had been scrawled since she'd last looked. Urgency level critical trajectory stability, unresolved. Under it, a line of figures wavered and broke off midstream. Whoever had been here last had started a correction and abandoned it. The abandoned line wasn't just wrong. It was wrong in a way that pointed at the exact blind spot she'd seen, like a signpost leaned an inch away from true north. One more burn planned in this configuration could cost them everything. Alicia stepped closer, breath held, pulse a drum. The equation skeleton stretched before her, incomplete and demanding. Straight ahead, the glass walls reflected her, small, steady, invisible to anyone who wasn't trying to see. She lifted her hand, not to touch the chalk, but to trace the invisible path her mind already knew. And as her finger hovered over the missing term, a motion sensor clicked in the corner. A camera's red light winked on like an opening eye. In the empty room, under the camera's gaze, Alicia stared at a flight trajectory left unresolved, and recognized an error so grave that correcting it could save the mission. But writing it down could expose the secret that someone inside NASA had already tried to erase her. The red glow of the camera lingered in her mind, long after she left Flight Dynamics. It was a reminder that every step she took inside those walls was recorded, cataloged, and if someone chose, used against her. Alicia moved through the rest of her shift with a strange stiffness, as though every movement carried weight. By the time she reached the supply closet, her hands trembled as she placed the mop back into its holder. At home, however, the tremor transformed into something else. She sat at her kitchen table, pulling her worn notebook from her bag. The edges were frayed, the pages soft from years of being turned, erased, and rewritten. In these pages, her world existed unfiltered, an alternate NASA, one that valued clarity of thought over the color of her skin. She turned to the latest section, where she had copied the faulty equation from the chalkboard. It stretched across the paper like an unfinished sentence. She picked up her pencil and began, her handwriting quick and deliberate. For her, equations were not abstract. They carried sound, rhythm, almost a pulse. Each number felt alive. Each symbol leaned toward the next with purpose. She drew the corrections slowly, as though unveiling a secret. Line by line, she carved out the adjustment NASA had been missing. It was not glamorous. It rarely was. The correction wasn't a stroke of brilliance that rewrote physics. It was humility, acknowledging a subtle gravitational pull they had ignored. She factored in Earth's subloteness, accounted for drift, and adjusted the trajectory window. When she set her pencil down, the page was filled with clean resolution. The problem that had tormented a room full of engineers had dissolved under her hand in less than an hour. Her chest tightened, not with triumph, but with grief. She should have been in that room, at that board, holding the chalk herself. Instead, she was here, solving problems in silence, pretending her brilliance was something shameful. Alicia closed the notebook and pressed it to her forehead. She whispered into the stillness of her apartment. One day they'll see. But in NASA's world, being seen could be dangerous. She knew how easily curiosity could be twisted into arrogance, how quickly they would call her an imposter for daring to think she belonged at their board. Harold's warning echoed in her ears. We don't pay you for pretend. The next morning, she tucked the notebook deep into her cart, beneath rolls of paper towels and disinfectant sprays. It stayed close to her all day, a secret heartbeat under the clatter of her work. Whenever she passed a chalkboard, she added notes in the margins of her mind, later copying them down in her hidden pages during breaks. Her cart became more than a janitorial station. It was her moving lab. She kept her distance from the engineers, speaking only when spoken to. But sometimes she caught fragments of their debates. The words landed like sparks, igniting whole chains of calculation inside her. She would retreat, pull out the notebook, and write furiously in stolen minutes. By the second week, the notebook had grown heavy with fresh solutions. Some of them weren't just corrections. They were improvements. Ideas that would optimize fuel loads, reduce burn time, increase efficiency. Alicia knew what she was holding. In her hands was proof that she wasn't just capable of working at NASA. She could change NASA, and yet she hid it like contraband. One Thursday evening, the building was quieter than usual. Alicia pushed her cart through flight dynamics, the chalkboard still scarred with unsolved equations. She couldn't resist pulling the notebook from its hiding place. Standing in the empty room, she placed it on a workstation and began transcribing her solution. Her pencil moved fast, capturing every nuance she had worked out the night before. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were nearly upon her. "Still here?" Alicia froze. Gerald Park, operations supervisor. His voice was sharp, precise, like the man himself. He was in his 40s, with neatly parted hair and a habit of adjusting his tie whenever he spoke. She slid her hand quickly over the open notebook, half closing it. "Just finishing up," she said carefully. Park's gaze moved from her cart to the desk, to the notebook under her palm. He stepped closer, too close, his eyes narrowing. "You're not supposed to be near these workstations." "I wasn't." "Don't lie." He leaned down, glancing at the edge of the page visible under her hand. "What's that?" Alicia forced a smile. "Just my cleaning notes." Park's lip curled faintly. "Cleaning notes." His tone dripped with disbelief. "Yes, sir," she said, her heart hammering. He stared at her for a long moment, then straightened. "Keep your cart out of this wing after hours. I don't want to see you in here again, unless you're called." "Yes, sir," Alicia whispered. He left without another word. She waited until his footsteps vanished before she allowed herself to breathe. She gathered her notebook, slid it deep under the cleaning rags, and wheeled her cart out of the room. Her hands were trembling, but her resolve was not. If Park had seen even a corner of her equations, she could have lost everything. The next few days, Alicia kept her notebook sealed away, barely daring to look at it. The fear of discovery pressed down harder than ever. And yet, every time she passed a chalkboard, every time she overheard another failed debate, the urge clawed at her. Write it down, capture it, don't let it slip away. By Friday evening, she couldn't resist anymore. Alone in a quiet wing, she pulled out the notebook and began writing again. Equations spilled across the page, unstoppable. Her world narrowed to numbers, to the rhythm of correction, to the pure language of truth. She didn't notice the janitorial cart shift when her elbow brushed against it. She didn't notice the notebook slide to the edge of the desk. She only noticed when it hit the floor with a dull thud, the cover flying open, pages spread wide, full of her most detailed solutions, lying exposed under the fluorescent light. And worse, it had landed right beside a supervisor's desk. The door creaked open. Alicia froze as the sound of footsteps entered the room, her notebook lying open on the floor, its pages filled with equations far beyond her role. The notebook lay open like a confession, its pages full of numbers and arrows that didn't belong to a janitor. Alicia's first instinct was to dive for it, to scoop it up and hide it before anyone could see. But the footsteps had already crossed the threshold. Gerald Park stopped short when his eyes landed on the notebook. His brows pulled together, not in confusion, but in irritation, as though the very sight of those equations was an inconvenience. He bent, picked it up by the spine, and flipped a page with his thumb. The silence between them stretched, heavy, merciless. "These are trajectory calculations," he said finally, his voice low but edged with suspicion. He turned another page, his eyes narrowing further. "Not just scribbles, these are classified models." Alicia's throat closed. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but steady enough to be heard. "They're mine. I didn't copy anything. I worked them out on my own." Park looked up sharply, his expression twisting into something between disbelief and disdain. "Yours? Don't insult me. These formulas aren't something a custodian would know. You must have copied them down while you were cleaning." "I didn't," Alicia said quickly, her palms damp. "I swear. I've been studying on my own for years. I understand this work. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Studying. On your own. Do you have any idea how arrogant that sounds? Do you know how many degrees, how many years of training it takes to even attempt these equations? Alicia's chest ached. I'm not trying to take anyone's place. You just what? Park snapped, his voice rising. You think you can stroll in here with a mop, peek over shoulders, and pretend you belong in the control room? You think because you can scribble a few numbers, you're suddenly one of us? The words stung sharper than any slap. Pretend. Belong. Each syllable was a gate slamming shut. I'm not pretending, she said, her voice quieter now, steadier despite the storm inside. I know what I see, and I know I can help. Park closed the notebook with a snap and thrust it toward her. You're not here to help. You're here to clean. That's it. His gaze dropped to the badge clipped to her chest, and he tapped it with 2 fingers. This is what you are. Custodial. Not scientist. Not engineer. Custodial. If I ever catch you writing down lab work again, you won't just lose this job. You'll be blacklisted from every federal agency. Do you understand? The words sank into her like stones, pulling her deeper into silence. She nodded once, though everything in her wanted to scream. Good, Park said, already turning away. Burn that notebook if you know what's good for you. He left without another glance, the door shutting with a soft finality that felt louder than a slam. Alicia stood frozen, the notebook clutched against her chest, her knuckles whitened around it. For a long moment, she couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Her mind replayed his words over and over. Custodial, not scientist. Blacklisted. Burn that notebook. That notebook was her life. It was the sum of years of study, sacrifice, late nights, and quiet victories. Burning it would be like tearing out her own voice. She sat heavily on the edge of a workstation, her shoulders folding inward. The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly, casting harsh shadows on the walls. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, as shame and anger warred inside her. But beneath the weight of it all, a stubborn spark burned. She remembered her father's voice in the garage. If the world won't give you a lab, we'll make our own. She remembered her mother's whispered reassurance. Don't you let them dim your shine. No matter what Gerald Park said, no matter what badge hung around her neck, the truth lived in those pages. She had seen the problem, she had solved it, and no one could erase that. Alicia pressed the notebook to her chest and whispered, "They'll never take this from me." The next morning she moved through the hallways with deliberate care, her cart squeaking slightly as it rolled. Park's warning echoed in her ears, but so did her vow. She avoided the engineer's eyes, kept her head down, and forced her hands not to tremble when she wiped chalk from desks. In flight dynamics, the atmosphere was different, tighter. The usual hum of debate was replaced with clipped exchanges and grim faces. Engineers clustered around the chalkboard again, but this time, the urgency in their voices was sharper, edged with panic. Alicia slowed her pace, her mop trailing behind her, her eyes lifted to the board, and there it was. Her problem. The same faulty trajectory, but now in bold red letters scrawled across the top. The word urgent shouted back at her. Her chest tightened. The equations had been copied over, line for line, exactly as she had seen them days ago. And the flaw still there, uncorrected, stared back at her like a dare. An engineer slammed a marker down on the table. We're out of time. If we don't fix this, the whole mission collapses. Another rubbed his temples. We've run simulations for 72 hours, and nothing holds. Nothing. Alicia's grip on the mop tightened. Her correction was right there in her notebook. She could fix it in minutes. But Park's threat rang in her ears. If I ever catch you writing down lab work again, you'll be blacklisted. Her notebook suddenly felt heavier in the cart, as though it knew the stakes. She glanced at the board again, then at the room full of desperate men and women, all missing the answer sitting under rolls of paper towels and disinfectant. And then, slowly, one of the engineers turned his head. His eyes landed on her. For a moment it looked like recognition, not of her brilliance but of her presence, her intrusion. Alicia froze under his gaze, the unsolved problem burning behind her, knowing she held the solution but risked everything if she dared to reveal it. The air in flight dynamics felt different that morning, thicker, heavier, as though the very walls carried the weight of an unsolved riddle. Alicia could sense it the moment she stepped inside with her cart. Engineers huddled tightly in small groups, their voices rising and falling in frustrated tones. Coffee cups littered the desks, their rims stained dark, a testament to sleepless nights spent chasing an answer that remained out of reach. She pushed her cart toward the corner of the room, forcing herself into the background. Her badge, with its cruel label, gleamed against her chest like a brand. She set the mop aside, picked up a rag, and began wiping down tables that didn't need cleaning. Her hands moved, but her mind was elsewhere, fixed on the chalkboard at the front of the room. Across its black surface, the equations sprawled in uneven layers, some half erased, others circled furiously, red markers slashed through entire sections. Above it all, the urgent warning screamed in capital letters: trajectory stability, critical. Dr. Everett Lang stood near the board, his posture weary, but his tone sharp. We've run every model 3 times. Each one drifts off course after the second burn. At this rate, we'll waste fuel correcting mid-orbit, and we don't have that luxury. A younger engineer, Bryce, slammed his palm against the table. We need someone from advanced orbital dynamics to step in. This isn't something any of us can brute force. Chelsea, the woman with the maple leaf pin, folded her arms. Advanced orbital dynamics is already swamped. Besides, do you really think they'll conjure a miracle in 48 hours? This is what we've got. Arguments sparked from every corner, voices overlapping in a storm of blame and desperation. Alicia's rags stilled on the table, her breath shallow. She could see the flaw as clearly as she saw her own reflection in the polished surface. The missing factor, a correction so small yet so vital. Without it, the mission would collapse. Her chest tightened. She had already worked the solution out in her notebook, hidden beneath rolls of paper towels on her cart. She knew the answer. She was the answer. But Park's threat echoed in her memory. Burn that notebook. Stay in your place. The words coiled around her throat like a rope. If she spoke now, if she even hinted at what she knew, they would crush her. Not because she was wrong, but because she wasn't supposed to be right. Maybe we're looking at this wrong, another engineer muttered, his voice hoarse from too much caffeine and too little sleep. Maybe the payload distribution is off. If we shave weight. No. Lang cut him off, rubbing his temples. We already tested that. It isn't weight, it's stability. We're chasing a phantom in the math. Alicia's hand trembled as she wiped the table again, over and over, polishing the same clean spot until the wood gleamed. Her heart pounded louder with every word from the engineers. They were spinning in circles, wasting precious time, burning through resources that couldn't be replaced. And all the while, the solution sat in her notebook, silent and unseen. Her thoughts screamed at her. Say it. Just one sentence. Write it down. Leave a hint. Something. But her body stayed rooted in fear. She remembered the scholarship letter that had once lifted her into the stars, then the rescindment that had dragged her back to Earth. She remembered Park's sneer, his voice dripping with contempt. This is what you are. Custodial. Her silence felt like complicity, like watching a train speed toward a cliff and refusing to pull the brake. But if she spoke, what then? Would they accuse her of theft, of arrogance, of fraud? Would they fire her, blacklist her, erase her completely? Alicia pressed her rag flat against the table, her knuckles white. Lang exhaled heavily. We're not going to solve this today. Adjourn and reconvene in the morning. Bring fresh models, fresh eyes. The engineers groaned, gathering their papers, muttering under their breath. Some carried laptops under their arms. Others dragged themselves toward the exit, like soldiers leaving a lost battle. Alicia's heart thudded harder with each step they took away from the board. The room was emptying. If she slipped forward now, chalk in hand, she could rewrite the trajectory in less than 5 minutes. She could fix it before morning, before another hour was wasted. She glanced at the door. The last engineer was nearly gone. Her pulse quickened. She could do it. The engineer stopped. Bryce turned back, his eyes narrowing. He had caught her staring at the board, her rag frozen in mid-motion. His brow furrowed as he studied her, the mop cart at her side, the badge on her chest. Alicia tried to look away, tried to make her hands move again, but her body betrayed her. Bryce's lips curled into a frown. Why is the janitor staring at classified material? The words sliced through the air like a knife, sharp enough that the few engineers still packing up turned their heads. Alicia's blood went cold. With the board behind her, and Bryce's accusation hanging in the air, Alicia realized she wasn't invisible anymore, and the room was waiting to see if she would explain herself or be exposed. Bryce's words had cut through the room like a blade. But mercifully, no one pressed the accusation further. The engineers were too exhausted, too wrapped in their own frustrations to care about a janitor's stolen glance. Still, the weight of those eyes on her, cold, suspicious, dismissive, clung to Alicia long after the room emptied. That night, silence wrapped the halls of NASA. The corridors, stripped of daytime noise, seemed to breathe differently, like a giant machine cooling after overuse. Alicia pushed her cart slowly, her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. Every door she passed bore names on plaques, each one belonging to someone with credentials, authority, with respect. Hers was the only name, not attached to a door, but to a mop bucket. In flight dynamics, the chalkboard still loomed, its web of equations glaring under the fluorescent lights. Red letters screamed urgency, but the room was deserted, abandoned, until morning. Alicia paused in the doorway, her rag limp in her hand. She knew what would happen tomorrow. The engineers would gather again, chase the same ghost, lose more time, and drift further from a solution that already sat inside her notebook. She could almost hear the arguments already, the voices layering over each other, the desperation mounting. Her chest ached with a thought she had tried to bury all day. What if the mission fails because I stayed silent? She glanced behind her. The hallway stretched empty. Cameras blinked in the corners, but she had learned the rhythm of their sweep. She knew where the blind spots lived. Slowly she reached into her cart and pulled out her notebook. She flipped to the page, the correction clear and bold. Her pencil hovered over it as her mind battled itself. Speaking up meant exposure, and exposure meant ruin. But what if anonymity could bridge the gap? Her eyes darted to a pile of scrap paper stacked near the corner of the workstation. She pulled a sheet free, crisp and white, and placed it flat on the desk. Then, with quick, deliberate strokes, she copied her solution. Line by line, her handwriting filled the page, precise and steady, her heart racing faster with every mark. The silence in the room thickened. She imagined Park's sneer if he saw her now. Gerald's threat replaying in her head. Burn that notebook. Stay in your place. But Alicia kept writing. When she finished, she stared at the page. It looked innocent, almost mundane. Just numbers, letters, arrows. But inside those symbols was salvation. A correction that could save millions of dollars, prevent a launch failure, protect NASA's reputation. Her fingers trembled as she set the pencil down. She folded the paper once neatly, then placed it on the central desk, the one where the day's fiercest debate had raged. She lingered, staring at it. The anonymity comforted her. It wasn't her name that would be on trial. It was the math. Math was pure. Math didn't care about skin color, gender, or titles. Math simply was. And yet, a part of her still longed to scrawl her name at the bottom, to claim the credit she deserved. But fear crushed the impulse. She wanted them to see the truth, not her. Alicia slid the notebook back under her cleaning rags, packed her supplies neatly, and wheeled the cart toward the door. As she stepped out, she cast one last glance over her shoulder. The folded sheet sat on the desk like a seed, waiting. That night, sleep evaded her. She lay awake in her small apartment, the shadows shifting across the ceiling. Every creak of the building made her flinch, as if the walls themselves might accuse her. But beneath the fear pulsed something else, something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed not of mops and buckets, but of rockets arcing smoothly across the night sky, guided by her invisible hand. The next morning, flight dynamics was buzzing before Alicia even arrived. She sensed it the moment she stepped off the bus and saw engineers rushing through the entrance, papers clutched tightly, faces alight with urgency. She pushed her cart through the halls, her pulse quickening. As she neared the control wing, the noise grew louder, a storm of voices colliding. She slowed, her hands gripping the cart's handle, and peeked inside. Chaos. Engineers clustered around the central desk, the folded sheet now opened wide. Fingers jabbed at the equations, voices overlapped. Disbelief clashed with excitement. This works, someone shouted. It can't be right. How did we miss this? It's clean. It's perfect. Look, stability holds through the second burn. Dr. Lang stood at the center, the page in his hand, his eyes wide with something like awe. Who wrote this? He demanded. No one answered. Bryce frowned, glancing around the room. It wasn't here last night. Someone left it. Chelsea leaned closer, scanning the handwriting. No initials, no name, just This. Lang slapped the paper against the board, aligning it with the messy scrawls from the day before. He began transcribing the correction in chalk, each line drawing gasps from the crowd, as the puzzle finally clicked into place. Alicia's chest burned as she wiped down the far counter, pretending to work. Her heart soared and broke all at once. They had seen it. They believed it. Her solution was no longer hidden in a notebook. It was alive, moving through their voices, commanding their respect. And yet she was invisible. Her eyes stung as she bent over the counter, scrubbing at a stain that wasn't there. She wanted to smile, to cry, to laugh at the absurdity of it all. They were praising her work without knowing it was hers. Lang turned back to the room. "We need to know who wrote this," he said firmly. "Whoever it was, they may have just saved the mission." A silence followed, tense and expectant. All eyes darted around, but no one stepped forward. And in the corner, Alicia kept wiping, her rag trembling in her hand. The room erupted with speculation over the mysterious author of the solution, while Alicia stood only feet away, her secret balanced on the edge of discovery. The page with Alicia's solution hung on the chalkboard like a revelation. Engineers clustered around it, their voices climbing higher, tangling into arguments that filled the air with both excitement and suspicion. The red urgency marker above their heads seemed to pulse brighter now, as if mocking their disbelief. Bryce's voice cut first. "This could be a prank. Somebody slipped this in to mess with us. Nobody just solved something we've been tearing apart for weeks overnight." Chelsea shot back. Her eyes narrowed. "Prank? Look at the math, Bryce. This isn't some kid doodling formulas. It's airtight. Whoever wrote this knew exactly what they were doing." Another engineer shook his head, his tie loose, his face pale from lack of sleep. "But how? We've got people with doctorates fighting over this. You're telling me some ghost mathematician drops an anonymous note, and suddenly everything's fixed?" Alicia's hands shook as she wiped down a spotless table in the corner. She kept her back slightly turned, praying no one noticed the tremor in her shoulders. Her heart pounded so hard, it felt visible, like the whole room could hear it. Dr. Everett Lang stepped forward, his gaze sharp as he studied the paper. He wasn't dismissing it, wasn't mocking it. His eyes moved slowly, carefully, tracing every line. After several long moments, he turned to the room. "This isn't a prank," he said quietly, but with a weight that hushed the arguments instantly. "This works. It doesn't just patch the problem, it corrects the root of it. Whoever wrote this saved us." A silence followed, thick and electric. Bryce crossed his arms, frowning. "Then where's the author? Why hide if it's real?" Chelsea leaned on the table, her voice colder. "Because maybe they weren't supposed to be in here at all. That's why it's anonymous." Her words hit Alicia like a blow. She bent lower over her rag, her face hidden, praying they wouldn't connect the dots. The door opened suddenly, and the director of operations, Richard Hale, strode in. His presence immediately altered the atmosphere. A tall man with silvering hair and a reputation for being both ruthless and brilliant. Hale's eyes scanned the room like radar. "What's this I'm hearing?" he demanded. His voice was deep, commanding, a tone that expected obedience. Lang handed him the paper without hesitation. A solution to the trajectory instability. The silence in the room thickened. She imagined Park's sneer if he saw her now. Gerald's threat replaying in her head. "Burn that notebook. Stay in your place." But Alicia kept writing. When she finished, she stared at the page. It looked innocent, almost mundane. Just numbers, letters, arrows. But inside those symbols was salvation. A correction that could save millions of dollars, prevent a launch failure, protect NASA's reputation. Her fingers trembled as she set the pencil down. She folded the paper once neatly, then placed it on the central desk, the one where the day's fiercest debate had raged. She lingered, staring at it. The anonymity comforted her. It wasn't her name that would be on trial. It was the math. Math was pure. Math didn't care about skin color, gender, or titles. Math simply was. And yet, a part of her still longed to scrawl her name at the bottom, to claim the credit she deserved. But fear crushed the impulse. She wanted them to see the truth, not her. Alicia slid the notebook back under her cleaning rags, packed her supplies neatly, and wheeled the cart toward the door. As she stepped out, she cast one last glance over her shoulder. The folded sheet sat on the desk like a seed, waiting. That night, sleep evaded her. She lay awake in her small apartment, the shadows shifting across the ceiling. Every creak of the building made her flinch, as if the walls themselves might accuse her. But beneath the fear pulsed something else, something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed not of mops and buckets, but of rockets arcing smoothly across the night sky, guided by her invisible hand. The next morning, Flight Dynamics was buzzing before Alicia even arrived. She sensed it the moment she stepped off the bus and saw engineers rushing through the entrance, papers clutched tightly, faces alight with urgency. She pushed her cart through the halls, her pulse quickening. As she neared the control wing, the noise grew louder, a storm of voices colliding. She slowed, her hands gripping the cart's handle, and peeked inside. Chaos. Engineers clustered around the central desk, the folded sheet now opened wide. Fingers jabbed at the equations, voices overlapped. Disbelief clashed with excitement. "This works," someone shouted. "It can't be right. How did we miss this? It's clean. It's perfect. Look." Stability holds through the second burn. Dr. Lang stood at the center, the page in his hand, his eyes wide with something like awe. "Who wrote this?" he demanded. No one answered. Bryce frowned, glancing around the room. "It wasn't here last night. Someone left it." Chelsea leaned closer, scanning the handwriting. No initials, no name, just this. Lang slapped the paper against the board, aligning it with the messy scrawls from the day before. He began transcribing the correction in chalk, each line drawing gasps from the crowd, as the puzzle finally clicked into place. Alicia's chest burned, as she wiped down the far counter, pretending to work. Her heart soared and broke all at once. They had seen it. They believed it. Her solution was no longer hidden in a notebook. It was alive, moving through their voices, commanding their respect. And yet she was invisible. Her eyes stung as she bent over the counter, scrubbing at a stain that wasn't there. She wanted to smile, to cry, to laugh at the absurdity of it all. They were praising her work without knowing it was hers. Lang turned back to the room. "We need to know who wrote this," he said firmly. "Whoever it was, they may have just saved the mission." A silence followed, tense and expectant. All eyes darted around, but no one stepped forward. And in the corner, Alicia kept wiping, her rag trembling in her hand. The room erupted with speculation over the mysterious author of the solution, while Alicia stood only feet away, her secret balanced on the edge of discovery. The page with Alicia's solution hung on the chalkboard like a revelation. Engineers clustered around it, their voices climbing higher, tangling into arguments that filled the air with both excitement and suspicion. The red urgency marker above their heads seemed to pulse brighter now, as if mocking their disbelief. Bryce's voice cut first. "This could be a prank. Somebody slipped this in to mess with us. Nobody just solved something we've been tearing apart for weeks overnight." Chelsea shot back. Her eyes narrowed. "Prank? Look at the math, Bryce. This isn't some kid doodling formulas. It's airtight. Whoever wrote this knew exactly what they were doing." Another engineer shook his head, his tie loose, his face pale from lack of sleep. "But how? We've got people with doctorates fighting over this. You're telling me some ghost mathematician drops an anonymous note, and suddenly everything's fixed?" Alicia's hands shook as she wiped down a spotless table in the corner. She kept her back slightly turned, praying no one noticed the tremor in her shoulders. Her heart pounded so hard, it felt visible, like the whole room could hear it. Dr. Everett Lang stepped forward, his gaze sharp as he studied the paper. He wasn't dismissing it, wasn't mocking it. His eyes moved slowly, carefully, tracing every line. After several long moments, he turned to the room. "This isn't a prank," he said quietly, but with a weight that hushed the arguments instantly. "This works. It doesn't just patch the problem, it corrects the root of it. Whoever wrote this saved us." A silence followed, thick and electric. Bryce crossed his arms, frowning. "Then where's the author? Why hide if it's real?" Chelsea leaned on the table, her voice colder. "Because maybe they weren't supposed to be in here at all. That's why it's anonymous." Her words hit Alicia like a blow. She bent lower over her rag, her face hidden, praying they wouldn't connect the dots. The door opened suddenly, and the director of operations, Richard Hale, strode in. His presence immediately altered the atmosphere. A tall man with silvering hair and a reputation for being both ruthless and brilliant. Hale's eyes scanned the room like radar. "What's this I'm hearing?" he demanded. His voice was deep, commanding, a tone that expected obedience. Lang handed him the paper without hesitation. A solution to the trajectory instability. Left anonymously. Hale scanned it, his brow furrowing. He turned the page sideways, then back, as if searching for the trick. His jaw tightened. This is correct. The engineers stirred. Some